Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin.
You book a cruise to escape. That's what everyone says, right? That the ocean helps you forget. That being far from land is supposed to be freeing. I booked this trip on a whim after a string of sleepless nights and one too many unanswered texts from people I thought cared. The cruise promised island hopping, luxurious dining, and the kind of peace you can't buy on land. What I got instead was something else entirely. The ship itself was grand, gleaming decks, smiling staff, bottomless drinks. My cabin had a balcony that opened straight to the sea, and on the first night, I stood out there listening to the waves until I fell asleep in the lounge chair. That should have been the first sign something was wrong. I never fall asleep easily, especially not outdoors. On the second night, just past midnight, I woke up to a sound I couldn't place. It wasn't mechanical or natural. It was like a voice, but warped, filtered through static. I thought it might have been coming from the ship's intercom, so I got up and walked to the hallway. Empty, no crew, no passengers, just a faint hum, almost like whispering, and a cold draft drifting from the stairwell that shouldn't have been cold at all. We were somewhere near the equator. I walked down one level to the observation deck. Something about the open glass walls made me feel like I'd be safer there. That's when I saw her. A woman in a soaked dress, standing barefoot at the edge of the room, her hair clinging to her face. I opened my mouth to say something, but she didn't move, just stood there staring out into the black water. Then, without turning around, she said, "We never reached the island." I blinked, and she was gone. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in a deck chair in the bright-lit hallway, watching shadows stretch and flicker under the cabin doors. Every now and then, I swear I saw wet footprints near mine, but they always disappeared when I leaned closer. The next morning, when I asked the front desk about the woman, they just stared at me. "There's no one on board matching that description," one of them finally said, "and this cruise doesn't stop at any islands. It's a loop, 5 days at sea, then back to the mainland." "But the brochure." "We don't hand out brochures," she cut in, her smile fading slightly. "I should have gotten off when we docked for fuel later that day, but I didn't, because that night I started seeing her again. That night, I locked myself inside my cabin. I stuffed towels under the door, unplugged the phone, even draped the heavy bathrobe over the peephole. I wasn't taking any chances, but around 2 a.m., the whispering started again. Not from the hallway this time, from my balcony. At first, it was gentle, like the sea was speaking, but slowly, the sound sharpened, forming words soaked in distortion. "Come drift, come drift." I told myself not to look, that she wasn't real, but something pulled me forward, some pressure behind my eyes that I couldn't fight. My hand reached for the curtain. I peeled it back. She was there, standing on the rail of my balcony, arms out, hair floating like she was underwater. Her face was pale and bloated, and when her eyes met mine, they weren't angry. They were empty. And then she leapt backward into the water, vanishing in the splashless black. I rushed out, heart pounding, expecting to see the churning sea. But my balcony didn't face the ocean anymore. It faced another ship, an old, rusted hulk floating just meters away. No lights, no sound. Its windows were shattered, deck covered in rot and barnacles. And worse, I saw people on board, not moving, not alive. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all standing perfectly still, watching me. The next morning, no one on the crew acknowledged the ghost ship. I asked around. People laughed, told me I needed rest, but the ship was still outside my window. Only now, it was closer. By the fourth night, people started disappearing. Quietly, no announcements, just empty chairs at breakfast, vacant cabins. When I asked a steward what was going on, he just said, "Some people drift." On the fifth night, the power flickered. The engine stopped. and every window filled with fog. I heard the woman's voice again, only this time she wasn't whispering. She was screaming, begging me to follow, begging me not to. You don't leave until someone takes your place. That's when I understood. The ship doesn't just float the ocean. It floats between places, between life and whatever waits just after. The passengers weren't vacationers, they were trapped, and the only way to leave was to bring someone else aboard. When we finally docked on the 6th morning, the crew smiled like nothing was wrong. Passengers cheered, some took selfies. I didn't speak to anyone, just walked straight to the pier, trying not to look back. But as I stepped onto the ramp, I locked eyes with a man boarding the ship. He looked tired, confused, just like I had 5 days ago. I didn't say anything. I didn't warn him, because maybe now I was free. But I still hear the water sometimes, and I still see the rusted ship in my dreams, and I wonder if I'm really back, or if I just drifted somewhere else. I've always been a solo traveler. Cruises never really interested me, but after a messy breakup and a burnout-inducing year, a week at sea seemed like the mental reset I desperately needed. The ship, the Astrabel, was marketed as an intimate voyage for the disconnected soul, a smaller vessel, only about 500 passengers, no internet, no phones, just sea, sky, and silence. When I boarded, something felt off. The crew greeted everyone with practiced smiles, but their eyes were wrong. Not tired, not rude, just vacant. I was assigned cabin 612. It was in an odd spot, far end of deck 6, tucked around a corner that didn't seem to belong. The hallway leading to it was windowless and unusually narrow. The carpet there didn't match the rest of the floor, faded red instead of blue. Inside the cabin, the layout was normal enough. A single bed, small desk, a porthole that looked out onto the sea. But the room had a smell, like salt water and rust. There was also a mirror on the wall, bolted tightly, old, and covered in faint scratches, like someone had tried to claw at their reflection. That night, I was woken by soft knocking. 3 taps. Pause. Then 2 more. I looked through the peephole. Nothing. No one. But when I turned around, the mirror was fogged up from the inside. I tried to wipe it, but my hand froze the second it touched the glass. Behind my reflection, someone else was standing. A woman. She looked soaked, like she'd climbed straight from the ocean. Hair matted, skin bloated and gray. Her mouth was wide open, and she was screaming, but I couldn't hear it. Just the sound of water dripping, steady and slow. I backed away. The next morning, I went straight to the front desk and asked for a room change. The receptionist, a middle-aged man with a tight jaw, looked up my cabin and paused. "Cabin 612?" he asked. I nodded. "There is no cabin 612. I laughed, confused. I told him that was my assigned room, showed him the key card. He took it, examined it. "It's not in our system," he said, handing it back. "You must have misread." I insisted, dragged him to the hallway myself. We turned the corner. The hallway was gone. Where the corridor had been was just a wall, clean, seamless, like no door had ever been there. He looked at me like I was the problem. "Get some rest," he said. I returned to my new cabin. 612 had disappeared, so they gave me 408, and tried to convince myself I was overtired, maybe seasick, maybe I'd hallucinated. But that night, I woke up again. 3 knocks. Pause. 2 knocks. I didn't get up. Instead, I pulled the blankets to my chin and stared at the ceiling, paralyzed with dread. That's when I heard it, the faint sound of something dripping, and when I finally glanced toward the mirror across the room, it was fogged up. Again. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I watched the mirror like it might breathe. At 6 a.m. sharp, I packed my things and went straight to the guest services desk. But the man who'd helped me yesterday was gone. In fact, the entire front desk was empty. not a single crew member in sight. I decided I'd had enough. I was going to find the ship's security or captain, someone with authority. But as I moved through the ship, I noticed something unsettling. It was too quiet. No passengers, no music, no shuffle of deck chairs or laughter from the pool. The halls were still. The dining room was deserted. The buffet was fully stocked, but the food was cold, stale, like no one had touched it in days. And then at the end of the main hallway, I saw the woman again, wet hair clinging to her face, that same drowned expression, her eyes locked onto mine, vacant, full of ocean. I blinked. She was gone. I turned and ran, found a stairwell, climbed until I reached the bridge. The control room door was open. Inside, the screens were static. No one was there. A cup of coffee sat untouched, long since cold. On the radar display, the ship wasn't moving. It wasn't even on the map. It was like we'd vanished. Something compelled me back to where cabin 612 had been. I don't know why. Some twisted instinct, maybe. I needed to see it, prove to myself I wasn't insane. I reached deck 6, the same stretch of hallway, and now the door was back. 612. I stared at it for a long time. The number was carved directly into the wood, not painted. The metal around the knob was rusted. The air smelled like salt again, and something else, mildew, and something rotten. I tried the handle. It opened. The room was exactly the same. Small bed, desk, porthole, but water dripped from the ceiling, forming a puddle that seeped into the carpet. On the bed sat a logbook. Its pages were soaked, but I could still make out the last few entries.
Day 5. More passengers are missing. Still no sign of land. Day 6. The sea won't let us go. The captain is dead. The crew has stopped speaking. Day 7. She comes every night now. Through the mirror. One by one, she takes us. And below that, scribbled in bold, wet ink, "If you've found this room, it's already too late." The porthole shattered behind me. A rush of water poured in like a scream. The door slammed shut. I was underwater before I could scream. I woke up in a hospital bed, dry, alone. A nurse came in. I asked her about the ship, the Astra Bell. She looked confused. "There hasn't been a ship called that for over 30 years, she said. "It disappeared in the Gulf without a trace. Everyone on board presumed dead." She showed me the news clipping, passenger manifest, a photo of the crew, and there, in the corner, the woman with the drenched hair, smiling in her uniform. Crew nurse, El Morrow, missing, presumed drowned. I still don't know how I survived, or if I ever really did, but every night since I've been back, I hear knocking, 3 times. Pause, then 2 more, and in the mirror, there's always water. I boarded the Emerald Horizon alone. It was a last-minute booking, a healing cruise, they called it. After everything that happened last year, I thought a break from the real world might help. A week at sea, away from phones, emails, and memories. The ship was massive, glimmering white decks, multi-story glass elevators, and a buffet that stretched for what felt like half a mile. Everyone around me was smiling, drinking, soaking in the sunshine, except for one man. He was standing at the edge of the buffet, staring down at a tray of untouched shrimp cocktail, tall, pale, dressed in all black, no plate in his hands, no drink. He looked hungry, but not for food. Our eyes met briefly. He didn't blink. I looked away first. That night, something strange happened. I went to the dining room around 8 p.m. for the formal dinner. The maitre d' scanned my name and smiled. "Ah, Mr. Lane, we've been expecting you." "Expecting?" He didn't respond, just handed me a gold card with no writing on it and pointed to a side hallway I hadn't noticed before. I followed it past normal dining rooms into a narrow corridor lined with red velvet curtains. At the end was a single door, black, ornate, no handle. It creaked open on its own.
Inside was a private room with just one round table, beautifully set, with a flickering candle in the center. And there were others there, 7 people, all dressed in formal black. Silent, they nodded as I approached like they knew me. Before I could ask anything, the door closed behind me. A waiter emerged, thin as bone, eyes sunken, and began serving dishes I didn't recognize, blackened meats, crimson wines, desserts that steamed without heat. No one spoke. They just ate, smiling with oily teeth. The woman to my right finally leaned over and whispered, "Don't drink the water. It remembers." I blinked. What? She didn't repeat herself, just kept chewing. Back in my cabin later that night, I noticed something new. The gold card, the one I was handed earlier, was now tucked into my pillow. It had writing on it now. Night 2, Hunger Wakes. I didn't sleep. That card stayed on my nightstand, glowing faintly in the dark like it had soaked in the candlelight from dinner. Night 2, Hunger Wakes. I kept telling myself it was a themed experience, maybe some elaborate murder mystery cruise. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I could feel it. The walls of the ship seemed tighter, the halls too quiet. Even the sea outside had lost its rhythm. The buffet was closed the next morning. Crew members stood in front of the entrance with blank expressions and dark circles under their eyes. When I asked why it was closed, one simply muttered, "Preparation." I tried calling the guest services line from the room. No tone, just static with a faint whisper underneath it. No escape. No escape. That night, I avoided dinner. I stayed in my cabin, lights on, curtains drawn. I thought about calling the Coast Guard, but there was no signal, no Wi-Fi. I even tried knocking on neighboring rooms. No answer. It felt like I was the only living person on board. At 11:47 p.m., the intercom clicked on. "Mr. Lane," a voice said calmly, "we request your presence in the observation lounge." I didn't move. The lights flickered. A scratching sound began. Inside the walls, like nails dragging along metal. Then something scraped across my ceiling. Something big. I grabbed the gold card and left the room. The observation lounge was at the very top of the ship, a glass dome overlooking the ocean. But when I arrived, there was no ocean to see. Just black water stretching out in all directions with no stars, no horizon. Like the world had stopped existing outside the ship. The same 7 people from the night before were standing in a circle. This time, they weren't smiling. In the center of the room was a silver serving platter, covered. The man in black, the one I'd seen at the buffet on day 1, stood beside it. "Mr. Lane," he said in a voice like smoke, "you've tasted the first course. You've heard the whisper. It is time for the offering." I shook my head. I didn't agree to any of this. He tilted his head. "You boarded. That was enough." He lifted the lid. I screamed. It was me. My own face, pale, eyeless, slack-jawed, staring back up at me, laid out on a bed of greens, still warm. I turned to run, but the others had closed in, their mouths opened wider than they should, teeth glistening, faces stretching. I don't remember passing out. I woke up in a lifeboat, drifting. The emerald horizon was gone. Not a ripple on the water, no other boats, just the gold card in my hand. It had changed again. "Thank you for your service." I flipped it over. And on the back, in blood-red ink, "Next cruise board soon."